We're going to dive into our message for this morning. And so, again, if you don't have a bulletin, let Kevin or Todd know in the back. They will hook you up. We're covering a pretty good section of Scripture this morning, so hopefully this will help keep you a little organized with the train of thought as we go through there. So if I'm not clear, maybe those notes will help you a little. But as we kind of dive into our conversation for this morning, when was the last time that you all booked a flight? And, I know Scott had quite an experience this week flying. And it's kind of funny, when you book a flight, if you haven't done it recently, you'll find yourself, at least this is the way I feel, a little frustrated about the pricing structure of airlines, right? You get one price, but then, like, literally, if you want to sit down, you're going to pay another price. If you think you might need to use the bathroom, you'll pay another price. And then, and I'm kind of exaggerating there, but on the other end, like, they charge you to put your bags on the plane. Like, seriously, who's going with just a backpack? All right, so there's all these little upgrades that you can pay for, right? All of these things to kind of upgrade your experience. Again, right, you can upgrade your legroom. You can upgrade when you board. If you want Wi-Fi, you can pay for that. If you want a nice drink and snack, you can pay for that. If you want to accumulate bonus points, you can upgrade and pay for that. Or if you think you might need it, you can pay for trip insurance, right? So literally all of these upgrades can double, sometimes even triple the cost of your ticket. And really the idea behind this is you're paying to make your trip just a little bit better through these upgrades. And transparently, depending on when you're flying, where you're flying, who you're flying with, some of these are worth it. But these little upgrades that we seek to make our lives a little bit better is kind of representative of who we are as people, right? As human beings, that we're constantly attempting to make our life just a little bit better through upgrades. Maybe we're attempting to book a flight and you're trying to make it a little bit better by getting that seat with more legroom. Maybe you're driving through the drive-thru to get dinner and you're going to upgrade that meal, right? You're going to supersize it. Bigger drink, bigger fry. Maybe you're thinking about upgrading your car for a few extra features. And here's an important one, upgrading your coffee, right? Get it a little bit fresher. But maybe upgrading our homes. Hopefully you're not thinking about upgrading your spouse. But that's who we are as people, right? Who doesn't like upgrades, right? Everyone likes their future to be a little bit better than their present, right? We want to upgrade from time to time, and this isn't bad. But again, what we do this for, if you kind of get down to it, is we want a better future than our current situation, right? We want our future to be better than our present situation. And I think every single one of us agrees to this, right? And if that's not how you think, if you want your future to be worse than your present situation, we're going to get you checked out, right? Everybody wants their future to be better than their present situation. So don't argue with that. That is a reality about who we are as people. Now, here's the problem, right? Here's the rub. That's where we want to end up, but sometimes we don't know how to get there, right? Out of all of the life upgrades that we chase after, all of these things don't necessarily guarantee a better future. In fact, they could make things even worse, right? These upgrades might help things, but they're not usually meant to solve the problems that we're throwing at them. For example, you book a flight, and you take advantage of those upgrades and those perks. They might be appreciated by your spouse, but it's not likely to repair the broken relationship. Right? You might look at a new piece of equipment for the farm, and you might think, man, this is going to upgrade my farming experience, but it's still not going to remove the stress that comes with farming. Or maybe you're thinking about upgrading your education, maybe upgrading your boyfriend or girlfriend. Right? And even though you might feel like you're getting an upgrade, accomplishing something, that won't overcome the deep-seated feeling of inadequacy that you might have. So I hope you kind of see this, right? Just because you upgrade parts of your life doesn't mean you're going to make it better. Right? Upgrading your job, getting that promotion, won't mask the reality that when you go home, your home life is still toxic. And sometimes we want to upgrade our life because we want a better future than our current situation. And this kind of is the reality of the fact that we are disappointed that we are not living our best lives now. We want to make our lives better. So maybe you come in the doors today with something on your heart, something on your mind, and you're not happy with where you're at, and you're thinking, how do I upgrade my situation? How do I make my life a little bit better for tomorrow? And that is what we're going to wrestle with in our text, right? How do we make our lives a little bit better? So if you have your Bible, turn with me to Ecclesiastes chapter 6. We're going to start in chapter 6, verse 10, and we're going to go all the way to chapter 7, verse 14. And I know we're going through two different chapters, and it looks disunified, but I'm telling you there's a thought process here, and hopefully you can track with me and Solomon as we walk through it. But we're in Ecclesiastes chapter 6 today, making our way through a large part of chapter 7, working through our series in Ecclesiastes, right? Making life work, making life matter. And as we've mentioned, this is a piece of wisdom literature written by King Solomon. Kind of similar to Proverbs, but certainly different as well if you haven't picked that up yet. He's accumulated some life experience. He has seen some people make some mistakes. He's made them himself. And here he is writing this piece of wisdom literature, informing people really what life is like under the sun, helping them consider what in life is worth pursuing, helping them consider how they are to spend their time and energy and effort. And so, we're looking at the book of Ecclesiastes. And as we begin to look at the first section of our text here, I want you guys to kind of walk with me down a little bit of a thought experiment. If I stood up here this morning and I told you guys that I won the lotto, what would be your reaction? Right? I told you, I won it like a month ago. Yeah, I like that. I won it like a month ago, and I've been keeping it silent. Right? You guys ever seen those memes? Like, I won't tell you I won the lotto, but there'll be signs. But if I won the lotto, hopefully, I think most of you guys would say, hey, that is a good thing, right? I'm happy for you. And I think every single one of us would affirm, yeah, that is a good thing, right? That's great. But is it really a good thing? Is winning the lotto good? There was an article I came across by CNBC that entitled, "Here's Why Lotto Winners Go Broke." And in the article, they consult a number of experts and share some personal stories. And they make this statement. Studies found that instead of getting people out of financial trouble, winning the lottery got people into more trouble, since bankruptcy rates soared for lotto winners 3 to 5 years after winning. There's another story within this article about a man named Jack who won $315 million in the lottery. We would all say that's a good thing. Many of us would say the problems I have in my mind would be solved with $300 million. But this man, 8 months after winning, he said, I don't like Jack anymore. I don't like the hard heart I got. He says he wished he had ripped that ticket up. He says, I don't like what I have become. In fact, it really destroyed him and his family. And so here is something we would all say is good. And it turned out to be the exact opposite for this man and for his family. And so I want us to consider, right, when we come in this morning and we think about upgrades for our life, things that we would say are good, I want us to reconsider how we define good. Who gets to define what is good for us and what is good for others? Many of us have an idea of what's good for our lives. If I were to ask your children what they should have for breakfast and lunch and dinner, their definition of good is going to be different than yours. And this is the same thing, right? As adults, we struggle with this. Is it good that you got that promotion at work? Is it good that you got those extra acres to farm? You might think so, but your family might not think so, as you are now less present. Who defines what's good? Is it good that you now have that vacation home? Many of us would say that's great. But maybe your fellow church members and Jesus might disagree since you're gone more often than not because you feel like you need to use it. Is it good that you are no longer in that relationship with that individual? Maybe if they were abusive, it was toxic. Maybe not if they were holding you accountable. So I want us to kind of begin to imagine that our definition of good maybe isn't that good. Is it good if I go to a closed country and break their laws and share the gospel? Is it good if I go to a closed country and break their laws and share the gospel? Is it good if I go to a closed country and break their laws and share the gospel? Is it good if I go to a closed country and break their laws and share the gospel? Is it good if I go to a closed country and break their laws and share the gospel? Is it good if I go to a closed country and break their laws and share the gospel? me take it a step further. Is it good that a sinless man was murdered 2,000 years ago? See, the reality is when we think about what is good for our lives, something we need to understand is that we are finite. We have no idea about what our future holds. We have no idea of the cascading impact of certain events in our life. So the things that are good might actually be bad for us, and the things that we perceive as bad might actually be good for us. You guys are like, okay, so what do I do with this? Right? If we want to enjoy a better present, what we need to first process, and here's your first blank, we need to recognize that our perception of good is limited. Our perception of good is limited. Let's finally jump into our text here, because this is how Solomon speaks about this reality, right? We are finite, living under the sun. We have a perception of what good is, but again, we don't know the end. Check out Ecclesiastes chapter 6, verse 10. He says, "Whatever has come to be has already been named, and it is known what man is, and that he is not able to dispute with one stronger than he." So what is Solomon saying there? He's telling us that long time ago, a sovereign God foreordained everything that exists. This tells us something about the God that we serve. This tells us that he is the one who knows how everything works out. And so when we have this perception of what good is for us in our life, what Solomon starts out here in verse 10 is he tells us, don't try and fight God over the events of your life. Maybe you come in here today with something on your heart and you're angry and frustrated with God. Why did you allow that bad thing to happen to me? We want to go and we want to explain to God how our life should go, especially when things aren't going our way. And what Solomon says right here is don't fight God over these things. He's stronger than you, and he knows how they work out. That still doesn't help us, though, but it helps us to understand, right, the guy that we're dealing with. Check out verse 11. The more words, the more vanity. And what is the advantage to man? Again, we're talking to God here. We're talking about God here. He is God, and we are not. And again, that language there, vanity, we've talked about it over and over again throughout our study. It means emptiness. It means absurd. It's like the idea of trying to grab the wind. And what he's saying here is the more words that you give to God to try to change his mind, the less it changes anything at all. Right? He says, don't try and control God. We have an idea of what good is for our life, but he is sovereign and he knows what the end looks like. So don't try and control him. Right? Don't send up this fancy prayer thinking you're going to change his mind. It's kind of like when you tell your kids no, and they keep asking you, right? You've already made up your mind, and the more and more they ask, you're just like, dude, you're wasting your breath. You've already made up your mind, and this is what Solomon is getting at. We serve a God who knows the beginning and the end. He is sovereign, and he is in control. Don't try and control him. It's best to spend your energy getting on board with the reality you face rather than explaining to God how he ought to do his job. Because sometimes, again, our vision of our life is different than what our reality looks like. We have an idea of what's good for us, while we also have no perception of the end of that. We need to recognize that our perception of good is limited. So don't fight with God over the events of your life. Don't try and control him. And he continues here in verse 12. And I'm telling you what, this passage really hit me as I was studying with us. Verse 12, for who knows what is good for man while he lives the few days of his vain life, which he passes like a shadow? For who can tell man what will be after him under the sun? Every single one of us has come in here with a vision of what our future should look like. We have a vision of what is good for us. And Solomon calls us out on it right there, and he wants us to consider that our perception of regarding of what good is for our life might not be that good, right? Kind of paints a little bit of a dark picture, right? We have a few days in this life, and then we pass. how do we have any idea what is actually good for us? It's an opportunity for us to consider that we might not have the full picture of our life. And so we ask the rhetorical question there, who knows what's good for man? And the unspoken response is only the one who knows the final outcome, knows what's actually good for us. Now, I noted there the language good in verse 12. This is the Hebrew word tov, and it's first introduced here in this verse, and it becomes a key word throughout the remainder of our text. Tov. In fact, it comes up 10 times in verses 1 through 14 of chapter 7. And it's used to introduce to us essentially our inability to know what's best for us. Since we don't know what comes next, we can't always properly perceive what is good. This is what he's getting at. In chapter 6, verse 10 through 12 marks a distinct shift in the book. Not sure how close you have been following us so far in this series, but in the first section of the book, we have this hopeless search for significance, right? In the limited days we have under the sun, we want to make an impact, we want to be significant, and Solomon lets us know, yeah, that's kind of hopeless, guys. But we're shifting here now to another section of this book where we're noting that there are a lot of uncertainties about life. And since life is uncertain, what he begins to get us to see is that we are called to lean into the one who is certain. We are called to lean into the one who knows what's good for us. Now, I am not a country music fan by any stretch of the means, you guys. My family comes on the radio, I switch it. It bothers me. I can write you a country music song very quickly with some of the things they sing about. But as I was sitting with this verse, thinking about my own life, right? Thinking about sometimes the frustrations I have with God, right? God, I know what's good for my life. Why don't you just give it to me? And again, maybe that's how you feel today. You're frustrated with God. I have a vision for my future, God. You need to get on board with this. I kept thinking of the country song Unanswered Prayers by Garth Brooks. You guys know that song? I will not sing it for you. But you can look it up, Unanswered Prayer by Garth Brooks. This song, it's kind of simple, it's kind of stupid. But he goes to, that's what I'm going to say about country. He goes to this hometown football game and he runs into an old high school girlfriend. I just offended half of you guys. That's okay. He runs into this old high school girlfriend. Again, you're not familiar with it. And he reflects on the fact that he loved this girl. He wanted to build this future with her. And he prayed that God would give her a future, give them a future together. And as you know the song, he never did, right? It was an unanswered prayer. And now as he reflects on that stage in his life with some age and perspective, he's glad God did not give him what he perceived as good. He's glad that God gave him the answer no. And the reality is many of you all, as you think back on your life, that is your story as well. Maybe it was an old high school girlfriend or boyfriend that you're like, whoo, I dodged that bullet. Maybe they're thinking that about you. But maybe, right, you come into church today and you're feeling a weight, right, of a seemingly missed opportunity. Maybe an untimely death. Maybe a relationship that ended. And you prayed that God would fix that, he would repair that things weren't the way they actually were. And maybe as you look back now with some time, you begin to realize that what you perceived as bad was actually good. Maybe that's where you're at today. You have a vision for what's good for your life, and you need to be reminded that your perception of good is limited. Maybe you're stressed about the reality that God's not doing what you think he should do in your life. Verse 10 through 12 of chapter 6 is a call for us to reconsider how we write our life story. It doesn't make hard things less challenging. It doesn't make us feel better maybe in the moment, but it is a call for us to be careful to deem something as good when God says that's actually not the best thing for you. Be careful what you deem as good or the loss of something you once deemed as being good, because we have no context of the end of our life. So we're going to read through the next 7 verses of our text. Open up your Bible. I'll put some of it on the screen later, but take a look. I want you to get a sense of the flow. Verses 1 through 8 of chapter 7. A good name is better than precious ointment. In the day of death, than the day of birth. It is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting. For this is the end of all mankind, and the living will lay it to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by sadness of face the heart is made glad. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. It is better for a man to hear the rebuke of the wise than to hear the song of fools. For as the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of the fools. This also is vanity. Surely oppression drives the wise into madness, and a bribe corrupts the heart. Better is the end of a thing than its beginning, and the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. Let's pause there for a moment. I'm not sure how long it's been since you guys have read through Ecclesiastes, but isn't that weird? I love reading the Bible, and I read something, and I'm like, dude, Solomon, what is wrong with you, man? This is kind of weird. Like, seriously, I want you to reflect on this for a moment before we unpack what he's doing. Like, what weird, mindset is Solomon in when he writes this? Right, verse 1, the day of death is better than the day of birth. I'd rather go and visit a new baby in the hospital than have a funeral. And then Solomon builds it even more, right? It's better to go to the house of mourning than to go to a house of feasting. Again, I would rather go to a wedding, I'd rather go to a surprise birthday party than to go to a funeral. Solomon, what are you on, man? Verse 3, sorrow is better than laughter. This is weird, okay? This is weird, and he is doing something here intentionally. And I want you to take note of it. As you kind of peruse down the next 13 verses of your text, chapter 7, verse 1 through 13, you'll notice that this word I pointed out to you comes up over and over again. In fact, 9 times the word tov, good, in the Hebrew comes up. Sometimes your text is translated as good, other times it's translated as better. We see it twice in verse 1, we see it in verse 2, 3, 5, twice in verse 8, we see it in verse 10, and we see it in verse 11. Solomon, what are you doing? Solomon wants us to realize something about life, something that enables us to enjoy the present better. Why does he seem to have this depressing tone? Well, it's necessary because, and here's your next blank, acknowledgement of the end makes the present better. Acknowledgement of the end makes the present better. And he makes this point by making a series of statements that I kind of entitled better than statements. We don't have time to dissect all of them, but he kind of groups these into 2 major sections. And it really, his thesis behind it is when you see the end, you're going to enjoy the present much more. Let's kind of unpack this a little bit. I'm not sure if you remember back from your math days, but that's a better than sign. And so let's kind of unpack this a little bit. He starts out by saying a good name is better than ointment or costly perfume. He says the day of death is better than the day of birth. And as I kind of look at these, he's kind of grouping these 2 things together. He's speaking about our reputation. He's speaking about a record of a life that has been well lived. And he says essentially that, hey, the day of death is better than the day of birth because when you're alive, you can still ruin your reputation. Right? The idea is a day of death marks a life that has been well lived. And it calls us to consider, when we consider our end, how do we want to be remembered? Because what we do today impacts ultimately how we're remembered at our time of death. Right? He's not literally saying I'd rather attend a funeral, but he's saying that this does something powerful for us. When we realize the end is coming, we think differently about how we live each and every day. That's why he says it's better than. Next to better than statements in verse 2 and 3. He says it's better to go to essentially a funeral than a wedding. A house of mourning is better than a house of feasting. And sorrow is better than laughter. And again, he uses these as spiritual prods to make you consider the life that you are living. There's a lot to be gained through sober reflections about death and heartache. I have seen this time and time again, right? You cannot not think about eternity when you are sitting here at a funeral and there's a body in front of you. You cannot think about the end when you're at a funeral. And that's really what Solomon is getting at. It serves as a prod. When you consider the end, you think differently about the present. You live differently. You think about how you want to be remembered. The end changes the present. That's why acknowledgement of the end makes the present better. This is what Solomon is getting at. The next section there. The wise people, though, have the end in mind. So hopefully we are all in that camp. We would think, okay, I'm living my life thinking about how ultimately I want it to end. And so he says, right, the wise have the end in mind. So he kind of begins to make these next series of statements. A rebuke of the wise is better than a song of fools, i.e., who are you letting speak into your life? You want to live a better present, you need to be careful the voices you allow to speak into your life. He says in verse 8, he has two sections there in verse 8. The end is better than the beginning, and the patient are better than the proud. And again, the patient there, the wise, know what the end looks like. They already know the outcome, and it enables them to deal with some of the issues of life in a more, I'd say, effective and healthy manner. They're not freaking out. They know that God is sovereign, He controls the end, and they're willing to ride the ups and downs of life. So if you want to enjoy a better present, you need to look at the end. Consider what the end looks like. This is what Solomon is getting at through these seemingly weird statements. But if the end shapes the present, and the wise have the end in mind, why does that matter at all? I've already alluded to it, and Solomon explains it here. Verse 9 and 10 up on our screen. Be not quick in your spirit to become angry, for anger lodges in the heart of fools. Say not, why were the former days better than these? For it is not from wisdom that you ask this. Right, he just finished talking about patience in verse 8. Here he says, right, do not be quick to become angry. Do not be quick to become angry about what's going on in your life, about that bad thing that has come to you. Right, he says, don't pine for the good old days. The wise understand how God works. The wise understand that they serve a God who's not surprised by the challenge they presently face. The wise have a little bit of perspective that God might be doing something in the situation in which they find themselves in. Let's continue on, verse 11 through 13. Wisdom is good with an inheritance, an advantage to those who see the sun. For the protection of wisdom is like the protection of money. And the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom preserves the life of him who has it. Consider the work of God. Who can make straight what he has made crooked? So there in the verse 11 and 12, he begins to compare wisdom to like having money, right? Both can protect you sometimes when life gets challenging, right? Putting a little away for a rainy day, your car breaks down, you got some cash to pull on. Wisdom is like that as well. When you experience a hard season of life, you encounter something you would deem as bad. Wisdom lets you know that God might be doing something here. Our idea of good might be a little skewed. I'm going to flesh that out a little bit more here. But wisdom is knowing that God is in control. Wisdom is knowing that we can't change the reality of the situation most of us find ourselves in. We have no control over what crop prices are. We can't change a health diagnosis that we or a loved one got. We can't change an early death of a loved one. We can't change some of the dumb choices that we have made in the past. And so it ends with this rhetorical question: who can make straight what he has made crooked? And the answer to that rhetorical question is no one. We can't argue with God. He is sovereign and he is control. He knows the beginning through the end. And so with all of this is a call for us. Verse 14, we'll finish up here. In the day of prosperity, be joyful. And in the day of adversity, consider, God has made the one as well as the other, so that man may not find out anything that will be after him. A couple things to note there. The very beginning, Solomon, through his grand observation of things, tells us something we already know. You're going to have some good days and bad days. You're going to have some good seasons and bad seasons. And he says there, in the day of prosperity, when you're experiencing the fullness and richness of life, enjoy it. God gave that to you as a blessing. But, he goes on, in the day of adversity, consider, God made both of those things. He made the great things of life that we enjoy, that we would deem as good, and he also designed the challenging seasons as well, even though we don't know why we walk through them. So the last encouragement for us to enjoy a better present, we need to consider that our perception of good is limited. We need to acknowledge that the end will make our present better perception of the end. And finally, we need to realize that it is best to surrender to the authority of God. Hope you guys appreciate what I did with the blanks there. Good, better, and best. Verse 14. Again, in the day of prosperity be joyful, in the day of adversity consider. God has made the one as well as the other, so that man may not find out anything that will be after him. Solomon says life is full of ups and downs. Enjoy life when it was good, but when life is tough, consider God might be at work here. It's a call to embrace God's control of our world, coupled with a realization that we cannot know what he's doing from one day to the next. It should cause us to enjoy what makes life good and encourage us to lean into his sovereignty, particularly when life is challenging. Now, as I consider how this has fleshed out in my own life, I can think of a lot of examples, some of which, frankly, I don't want to share with you. And you probably have those as well. But I think back to a season of my life when Paige and I lived in Dallas, Texas. We moved out there for me to attend seminary, moved out there with about enough money to pay bills for 6 weeks, didn't have a job, got tuition coming up, and it really was a step of faith for us. And God provided and took care of us. And I always look back on how he did that, and I think back to one distinct season a couple years into our time there when things were kind of tight. That was just the theme of that season of life. And I would go to work every day. Paige would go off to work as well, and often we would make lunch the night before. So you usually had two options for lunch of us. You could make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or you could make some ramen. Okay, they were the two options. And I would often opt for the peanut butter and jelly. It's kind of hard to make ramen in your truck while you're cleaning pools. And so the night before, I'm making my lunch, and I realized, this is really sad, we only had enough jelly for one sandwich. And I knew Paige had not made her lunch yet, and so I decided I would suffer, and I made a peanut butter sandwich just for myself. I'm like, okay, I can make this work. I made a peanut butter sandwich for myself. I left the jelly so that when she made her sandwich later, she could have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? The good stuff of life. And so I go to work that day, right? I choke down that sandwich. It wasn't that bad, okay? It really wasn't that bad. I grew to love those sandwiches. And I go to work that day, though, and we get back that evening, and kind of halfway through the evening, Paige is in the fridge, and she asked me, did you eat lunch today? I'm like, what a weird question this is. Of course I ate lunch. She's like, well, there's still jelly in the fridge. You see, she made lunch as well and saw there was enough jelly for one sandwich, and she saved it for me. Isn't that sweet? Some people would say that season of life was not good. It's not good that you have to choose between adding the extra upgrade of jelly to your sandwich or peanut butter. But I would say it was incredibly good looking back. It made me realize that even though I might prefer a different lunch, I'm not in need of anything. Right? I have a partner who's committed to walk with me through the challenges of life. Right? So much so she's willing to eat a peanut butter sandwich versus peanut butter and jelly. I had a partner that's willing to surrender to wherever God might lead us. And so my definition of good at that time was I would have liked to pick up, here's my definition of good, Taco Bell every day, right? That's my frivolous spending. But my definition of good was not God's definition of good, right? We walked through a hard season like that because it grew us together. It grew us as individuals. It grew us as a couple for whatever season God had next for us. And I want you to consider in your life, right? You might be walking through a season today that you would deem as not good, as hard, as challenging. But I want you to consider you don't know the end from the beginning, and you don't know what God is doing there. And in this text, in Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 6, verse 10, all the way to 7, verse 12, is a call for us to surrender to God's authority and redefine what's best for us. Because at that time, what was best for me was Taco Bell every day, a filet mignon in the evening. But what I actually needed was to figure out how to do life with my wife. And maybe that's where you are at today as well. We need to recognize that our perception of good is limited. Acknowledge that the end makes the present better, and that we need to surrender to God's authority. Got 2 questions to kind of help you do this week. Question number 1, what good thing do you feel like God denied you in the past that would have been harmful for you today? Right? It's your song, the unanswered prayers. And number 2, what version of good for your life do you need to surrender to God? Let's bow our heads in a word of prayer. God, thank you so much for this passage. And God, I pray that you just work in our lives this week. God, every single one of us has come in here today with what our version of good is for our future. God, we have a vision for what you need to do. Lord, we have an idea of what our life needs to look like, but God, you are sovereign and we are not. And God, help us to just have some context. Help us to have some wisdom that we read about here in this text, that maybe what you're doing here is beyond the scope of our understanding. And help us to surrender to your authority, to your sovereignty. And God, as we walk through the season, not knowing what does come next, Lord, may we rest in the encouragement that you love us and that ultimately, Lord, you are in control. So God, I celebrate those individuals who come in today who are in the joys of life. Man, that's a blessing. But Lord, I also grieve with those who are walking through some hard things. And God, may they feel your love and your encouragement. And God, may you grant them some kind of context as well, Lord, of what you're doing. So that, Lord, a year or 2 from now, maybe a decade from now, Lord, they could sing your praises of how you walked them through a challenging season and ultimately used it for good. God, we love you, and we need you every single day, and we pray that you walk with us through the challenging seasons that we might be going through today. In your amazing name, amen.